Wait, so you mean that COVID-19 being leaked from a lab was always a viable option and the government censored the shit out of it because it didn't meet their criteria along with the mainstream media? No, that's never been a thing. Alright, so the origins of COVID-19 has been heavily debated and been the real center of attention in mainstream media, as far as I've gathered, for quite a hot minute, since it, ultimately came from the Wuhan seafood market, allegedly. It was really, heavily suggested or stated that it came from just the Wuhan market. It didn't have anything else to, do with any labs or anything like that. It was just came from bats that were being sold at the seafood market, allegedly. Back when all of this stuff started emerging, there's kind of this little biotech lab in Shanghai, China, called Shanghai Ruilan Baku San Biotech Limited. Now, that's roughly 567 miles away from the Wuhan seafood market. This biotech lab happens to, ironically enough, be using a blue version of the Umbrella Corp symbol from the movie Resident Evil. Now, for those of you who don't know much about Resident Evil, the Umbrella Corp is like a huge corrupt conglomerate pharmaceutical company that essentially controls everything during like an apocalypse. They are extremely corrupt and fucked up, so they basically control everything and use it for the benefit of themselves, so they can live lavishly, meanwhile everybody else lives in hell. Another thing to take note of is that Corona is an anagram of the word raccoon, which ironically enough is the city that Resident Evil mainly takes place in. The reason why I kind of bring that up is because that situation that happened in the movie and what's kind of going on now is kind of a similar situation, same shit, different smell, A conglomerate, greedy, corrupt company covers up its sketchy involvements in creating a sort of pandemic or a extremely dangerous and fucked up event that happened. Just 14.913 miles or 24 kilometers southeast of the Wuhan seafood market is the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which studies some of the world's most dangerous pathogens. This is a level 4 biosafety lab. Now, this area is heavily dependent on seafood markets for sustainability of its economy, and it's an extremely aqueous region, like most of China. This is also true for a lot of other places in the country and in Asia as a whole. You should also take into consideration that pathogens and viruses spread a lot more quickly through water, so it really should come as no surprise that COVID spread as quickly as it did. The SARS virus is a part of the COVID family, which has escaped containment facilities in Beijing multiple times. This was also a claim made by a molecular biologist at Rutgers University. All this stuff was known about prior to the outbreak of this virus. In addition, a lot of people that spoke out against the mainstream narrative on this was including medical professionals, scientists, ordinary people like me and you, for example, just people that are smart or just had different ideals than what mainstream news and media said. All of these people that did this, they were silently taken out or silenced by the government and big media or big tech companies like Facebook, Twitter, etc. This has happened to multiple people over the course of the past year to year and a half just really since, you know, the start of all of this outbreak happening and everything else, if you paid close attention to most things going on in your daily life, you probably would have noticed that it was happening quite a bit. Now, this has gotten a lot better now, and it's starting to look more viable that COVID-19 was actually leaked from, you know, a lab. And whether or not it's intentionally, you know, like, I'll leave that up to you guys to determine, but the fact of the matter that it was just disregarded and anybody spoke anything different than what the mainstream media said was regarded as a heretic, kinda, and just like ultimately that they're fucking idiots. This all ends up like being connected to having funding from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and other associates like David Fauci and all those fun guys. Now, Russell Brand does a really good job in a video that he did on connecting the sort of money trail to David Fauci and just like the connection between that man and the Wuhan Institute of Virology, in addition to, you know, showing that the Wuhan Institute was covering up a lot of things prior to the outbreak happening and everything else, which is extremely sketchy. Or like very shortly after it was released, they were deleting records and all that is for, you know, maintenance. The files that were there were never to be found again. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation donated a grant of $189,232 to the Purebright Institute in a 2013 grant loan for looking to improve our understanding of and effective use of current control tools and measures, this is including vaccines, against peste de petits or petits, ruminants, and foot and mouth disease. These are two serious diseases affecting livestock in extremely developing countries. These are two very serious diseases affecting livestock that are widespread across developing countries. Then, in November of 2019, the Purebright Institute's website published an article focusing on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding Livestock Antibody Hub to the sum of $5.5 million. That's a very large amount of money, don't you think? And it's also Bill Gates, so it's kind of ironic enough because it's not really his particular, you know, field of interest or the field that he's in. He's in computer technology. Now, again, come to whatever conclusions you guys want to about this stuff, but me personally and a lot of people I know, we've looked at the stuff since it all happened, and it smells like a cover-up to us. And it looks like it too, because all the shit they've been doing. Like, if you don't have anything to hide, then you won't really be doing shit like the government and these big conglomerate tech companies are doing. But this was all orchestrated one way or another from what has been gathering up. Even if it wasn't intentional, like, the fact of the matter is that they were covering up the possibility that it could be a lab leak, or they were just straight up denying and pushing anything that suggested that down, like they had something to hide. Quite suspicious, don't you think? And this is all ultimately like tied to people like Bill Gates and the elites of the world who are extremely rich and greedy and powerful, or one of those three. This isn't really natural at all either. Now, on November 7th, 2019, a Netflix Explained documentary, which is by Vox, had an episode which was titled The Next Pandemic. The Next Pandemic, ironically enough, where Bill Gates predicted that the next pandemic would be from a zootonic body, so transferring from animal to human, and it would kill about 65 million people roughly. Isn't that extremely ironic? Bill Gates participated in a pandemic simulation which predicted to kill 65 million people. Now, Mr. Gates and others like Boris Johnson, aka, you know, greedy, corrupt people, have promoted globalism as the antidote to solving this whole problem. In other words, the centralization of power in order to solve the whole thing. Now, where have we seen that before after an emergency sort of state has happened?
Und wir
They said there's no such thing to connect it to a sort of lab or anything like that at all. In fact, anytime you spoke up and like stated that you felt it was more than likely a lab leak, which it's starting to look like it is, mind you, if you guys have been paying attention, you basically were just shunned, or you were just completely outcasted for that opinion, or you'd have your posts taken down or censored, etc., because it didn't meet the same criteria as what the mainstream media and all the like big companies and everything else were saying, and just the system was saying. So basically, if you said anything of a different narrative, you were canceled, so to speak, or you were censored heavily for it. But the more time goes on, the more and more viable it's looking that lab leak was actually a very possible theory to begin with. And it wasn't just conspiracy theorists and all that were saying that this was a very likely possibility. There were doctors, there were medical professionals, there were scientists, plenty of people that have credibility that were saying this stuff, and people still shunned them because mainstream media said, no, that's not it at all. So basically, you were taught to make anybody who thought differently feel like a fool and deny the possibility at all, which isn't how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to keep an open mind because it hasn't been discovered still. Until it's discovered, you can't just say, oh no, this is how it happened. That's not how shit works. The reason why I wanted to do this video ultimately, though, is because I felt like it needed to be redone, and I did this a while ago and talked about this stuff back in April and like that, or late March 2020, about this stuff at the beginning of all this. It was completely like, people were like, oh no, it couldn't be that, all because the CDC and, you know, the World Health Organization, all these places were like, no, that's not it at all, it can't be that, it's this thing, so that means it's this thing, and anything else is wrong. They didn't even know where the fuck it came from. They kept going back and forth with those answers all the time. It seems kind of fucking sus, doesn't it? I did a video on this. Ultimately, what happened was I did that video, uploaded it, and then shortly after that, within a couple of months, like 30 to 60 different videos of mine, all from that point onward, were degraded quality-wise. They were all 720p quality at least, because these are like my gaming clips and everything else, and you couldn't get it out of SD mode for viewing at all. I tried, it wouldn't work, but all those videos I made, they were degraded to SD quality when they're at least 720p to 1080p. I remember that specifically on my COVID video. I sat there and uploaded that video myself, and then it got degraded in quality, so that way people would be less likely to watch it, you know? And it wasn't just coincidence that Facebook happened to do that, because they were censoring a lot of my other posts that said things about that too, or they sit there and try to, you know, take it down or put me in Facebook jail because it goes against community standards, stuff like that. It was a whole bunch of other crap too, but like, that's the thing. People don't understand that this has always been viable. This sort of theory has always been a viable option from the beginning. Just because it's different than what the mainstream says doesn't mean that it's viable. Sometimes the mainstream is completely fucking wrong, and a lot of times they have been wrong. They sit there and intentionally cover stuff up. The press is just an informant of the man. People don't realize that neither. And it's become more and more true with each like generation that's passed on since the 50s and 60s. That's gonna be it for today. If you guys did enjoy, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And then hit that bell icon so that way you guys get notified when my next video goes live. Now, with that being said, I do hope you guys found this to be educational and enjoyable. Then, as usual, my dudes, please don't forget to, you know, live long and prosper, take care and peace, and keep it 1,000,000% real. I'll see you guys on the flip side.